My name is Marie. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how I went from being the family disappointment to owning the building my successful lawyer sister thought she controlled. Let me paint you a picture of what it's like to be the family disappointment. I'm Marie, the younger sister who never quite measured up to anything or anyone. And believe me, my family made sure I knew it every single day. If you want to hear how an underestimated sister shocked an entire family and turned the tables on years of humiliation, if you support Payback, hit the subscribe button, type Payback, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. And if you want to see justice served in the most satisfying way possible, make sure to subscribe, because this story is about to get intense. Valerie is 35, Harvard Law graduate with a corner office, designer everything, drives a BMW that costs more than I make in 2 years, and lives in a penthouse that looks like it belongs in a magazine. She has never, not once, let me forget that she's the successful one. The golden child, the one who did everything right. Me? I'm a graphic designer working mostly freelance, which is just a polite way of saying I'm constantly hustling to make ends meet. I live, paycheck to paycheck, in what everyone believes is my grandmother's old building that Valerie now manages like some kind of benevolent landlord. For years I've been paying $2,200 in rent, while Valerie constantly reminds me it's below market value. Like she's doing me this incredible favor that I should get down on my knees and thank her for. The way she'd say it too. You know, Marie, similar units in this area are going for $3,800. You're lucky I care about family. Always with this tone, like I was some charity case she was graciously helping out of the goodness of her heart. My parents, Robert and Linda, they absolutely worship Valerie. She can do no wrong in their eyes. When she talks, they hang on every word like she's delivering gospel. When I talk, they literally check their phones. I've watched my own mother scroll through Facebook while I'm trying to tell her about a project I'm excited about. But when Valerie mentions some case she's working on, suddenly, they're the most attentive audience in the world. It's been this way since we were kids. Valerie got the praise, the college fund, the connections, the encouragement. I got the leftovers and the constant reminder that I should be grateful for whatever scraps I received. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" was basically the soundtrack of my childhood. But our grandmother Eleanor? She was different. She saw something in me that the rest of the family completely missed. And honestly, that kept me sane through years of feeling invisible. While Valerie was busy impressing everyone with her achievements and climbing her career ladder, I was the one who visited Grandma every single week. I helped her with groceries when her arthritis got bad. I sat with her during doctor appointments when she was scared about test results. I listened to her stories about building her small real estate empire from absolutely nothing, starting with one tiny apartment building in the 1960s. Grandma owned 3 buildings in our neighborhood, including the one where I live now. She was proud of what she'd built, but more than that, she was proud of the fact that she'd done it all herself when women weren't supposed to be in real estate. When Grandma died 5 years ago, everyone just assumed Valerie would inherit everything. Of course she would. She was the lawyer, the responsible one, the family favorite who could handle big responsibilities. The will reading was exactly what everyone expected. Valerie got the buildings, the responsibility, the power. My parents beamed with pride watching their successful daughter inherit Grandma's legacy. What they didn't know, what absolutely nobody knew, was that Grandma had given me something else entirely 2 years before she died. Something that would change everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I always visited on Tuesdays. Grandma pulled me aside into her kitchen and said something I will never ever forget. "Marie, they underestimate you because you let them. Sometimes the quiet ones have the most power, but only if they're smart about when to use it." Then she handed me an envelope. Inside was account information for a private inheritance. Cash. Enough cash to completely change my life. She told me this was my opportunity to level the playing field. But there was one condition. I had to wait for the right moment. I had to let them show me exactly who they really were. "When the time comes, you'll know," she said. "They'll push you too far, and that's when you'll understand why I'm giving you this gift." For 3 years, I've been carrying this secret while watching my family treat me like I was less than. While Valerie collected rent from me in a building she thought she owned. While my parents stayed silent every time she reminded me how generous she was being. What they don't know is that their precious golden child has been living a lie for 3 years. And I've been quietly planning for this exact moment. If you're enjoying this story and want to see how this all plays out, make sure you subscribe, because what happens next will blow your mind. And let me ask you this. Have you ever had someone in your family who constantly made you feel small? Someone who used their success to make you feel like you didn't measure up? Drop a comment and tell me about it, because I have a feeling I'm not the only one who's been there. For 3 years, I watched Valerie play property manager like it was her personal kingdom, and God, did she love the control. She loved reminding me every single month that she was my landlord, that she held power over where I lived, where I called home. The texts would come like clockwork. Don't forget rent is due tomorrow, Marie. Just a reminder that market rate for your unit is $3,800, but I'm being generous. Always that word. Generous. Like I should fall to my knees in gratitude for her benevolence. Every family gathering became a performance for her. She'd find a way to casually mention my subsidized living situation in front of everyone. Well, of course Marie can afford to take that vacation. She's practically living rent-free, she'd say with a laugh that made my skin crawl. My parents would nod approvingly, so proud of their daughter's generosity toward her struggling little sister. But here's what killed me. I was watching everything. I saw how she raised other tenants' rents aggressively, sometimes doubling them overnight. I saw how she treated maintenance requests like personal favors she was graciously bestowing. "I'll see what I can do about your heating," she'd tell Mrs. Patterson from 3B, like fixing a broken heater was some kind of charitable act instead of basic landlord responsibility. I watched her transform from my sister into this cold, calculating businesswoman who started talking about maximizing the investment and bringing all units to market rate. The writing was on the wall in giant neon letters, but I stayed quiet. I played the role of the grateful little sister while secretly preparing for what I knew was inevitable. 3 months ago, the hints started getting less subtle. She'd mentioned how property taxes were going up, how maintenance costs were increasing, how she needed to standardize all leases to be fair to everyone. There. As if anything about this situation was fair. My parents would nod along like bobbleheads, actually suggesting maybe it was time I found a more affordable place, somewhere more appropriate for my income level. The condescension was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. They talked about me like I wasn't even sitting right there. Like I was some burden that needed to be gently relocated to where I belonged. But I just smiled. I nodded. I said I understood. Because I did understand. I understood exactly what they thought of me. 2 weeks ago, Valerie called me with that fake sweet voice she uses when she's about to destroy someone. "Marie, honey, I'd love for you to come to Mom and Dad's barbecue this weekend. We need to discuss your housing situation, and I think it would be easier to do it with the family present for support and understanding." Support and understanding. I knew exactly what that meant. Public humiliation. Making me look like the irresponsible sister who couldn't handle adult responsibilities in front of everyone who mattered. Making sure I had witnesses to my failure, my dependence, my unworthiness. Perfect, I thought. Absolutely perfect. So there we were, 15 family members gathered in my parents' backyard on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. Everyone was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents. The whole extended family enjoying burgers and potato salad, laughing and catching up like it was any normal family gathering. Valerie waited until we were all eating, until everyone was relaxed and comfortable, before she stood up like she was about to give some heartwarming toast. The calculated timing made my stomach turn. I need to address something with everyone here, because I believe family should support each other through difficult transitions, she began, her lawyer voice in full effect. My stomach dropped to my feet. I knew what was coming. But hearing those words still felt like being punched in the chest by someone you trusted. Marie's current rent situation isn't sustainable anymore. The market has changed dramatically. Property values have increased across the board, and I need to bring her lease in line with current rates. Starting next month, rent will be $6,800. The silence that followed was absolutely crushing. But here's what broke my heart. It wasn't shocked silence. It was knowing silence. The kind of silence that comes when people are hearing something they already knew was coming. They all knew. Every single person at that table knew this was going to happen. And not one of them had warned me. My own parents knew their daughter was about to financially devastate their other daughter. And they said nothing. They just let me walk into this ambush like a lamb to slaughter. Valerie continued with the confidence of someone who had already won. I know it seems like a big increase, but this is actually below current market rate for the area. Marie, I've prepared a new lease agreement for you to sign today, and I really hope you'll understand this is just business, nothing personal. Nothing personal. 3 times my rent, announced in front of my entire family like some kind of public execution, and it was nothing personal. I looked around that table, desperately searching for one face that showed surprise, concern, anything that looked like someone might speak up for me. My dad wouldn't even meet my eyes. My mom was actually nodding like Valerie had just announced she was donating money to charity. Then my Aunt Susan, sweet Aunt Susan who used to babysit me, actually had the nerve to say, "Well, you've been very generous for a long time, Valerie. Marie should appreciate what she's had." That's when something inside me didn't just break, it shattered completely. But not in the way you might think. It didn't break me down, it broke me open. Wide open. I realized in that moment that this wasn't just about money, this was about power. This was about control. This was about keeping me in my place, making sure I never forgot that I was the lesser sister who should be grateful for whatever scraps fell from their table. This was about humiliating me in front of everyone I loved, making sure they all witnessed my failure to launch, my dependence, my complete inability to take care of myself like a real adult. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have possibly known, was that I had been waiting for this exact moment for 3 years. If you want to see how the family disappointment turned the tables on everyone who underestimated her, hit subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been blindsided by your own family? Have you ever realized that the people who claimed to love you were actually working against you? Because that betrayal cuts deeper than anything a stranger could ever do to you. I set down my fork with a calmness that surprised even me. My hands weren't shaking, my voice didn't crack. For the first time in my entire life, I felt completely in control in a room full of people who had always made me feel powerless. I looked directly at Valerie, straight into those eyes that had looked down on me for 32 years, and said quietly, "I won't be signing that lease." The confidence in my own voice shocked me. Where had that come from? This wasn't the Marie who apologized for taking up space, who smiled when people hurt her, who said thank you when she should have said, "Go to hell." Valerie left, actually left, that condescending, dismissive sound that had haunted my childhood. "Marie, I understand this is a shock, but you don't really have a choice here. This is business. If you can't afford the new rate, I'm happy to help you find somewhere more suitable for your budget." More suitable for my budget. Like I was some charity case who needed her help navigating the world of grown-up responsibilities. "That's very kind of you," I replied, reaching for my phone with steady hands. "But I think there's been a misunderstanding about who exactly owns what around here." I dialed a number I'd had saved for 3 years, waiting for this exact moment, and put it on speaker for everyone to hear. "Mr. Cameron? It's Marie. I think it's time." The confusion around that table was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. I could see the questions racing through their minds. Who is Mr. Cameron? Why is Marie making phone calls during our family confrontation? Why does she look so calm when she should be panicking? "Of course, Miss Johnson. I'll be there in 10 minutes with the documents. Should I bring the building inspection reports as well?" "Yes, please. I think my family would be interested to see those." I hung up and looked around the table at 15 faces staring at me like I had just spoken in a foreign language. Valerie's smirk was faltering for the first time since this whole nightmare began. My parents looked confused and concerned. Everyone else was just staring. "Who was that?" my dad asked, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "That was my lawyer, Mr. Cameron. He's coming to clear up some confusion about the ownership of 1247 Riverside Drive. You know, the building where I live. The building Valerie thinks she owns." The next 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. Nobody knew what to say. Valerie kept looking at her phone like she was going to call someone, but who? Her lawyer? To tell them what? That her little sister had just turned the tables at a family barbecue? When Mr. Cameron arrived, he looked exactly like what he was. A competent attorney, carrying a briefcase that contained 3 years' worth of carefully prepared documents. Documents that were about to change everything. These people thought they knew about me. He introduced himself politely to my family and began explaining what they were about to learn, speaking in that clear, professional tone that lawyers use when they're about to drop a bomb. 3 years ago, Miss Marie Johnson, acting through Riverside Holdings LLC, purchased the property at 1247 Riverside Drive from the estate. The purchase was completed legally and properly recorded with the county. Miss Valerie Johnson has been operating as property manager under the assumption that she owned the building, but she is in fact a tenant herself. The silence this time was different. This wasn't knowing silence or complicit silence. This was pure, shocked silence. The kind of silence that comes when everything you thought you knew about the world gets turned completely upside down. Valerie's face went white as a sheet. "That's impossible. The building was left to me. I have grandmother's will right in my office." "The building was left to you," Mr. Cameron confirmed patiently. "However, the estate needed to be settled, and all debts needed to be paid. Miss Marie purchased the property from the estate at fair market value. She has been the legal owner for 3 years." My mom finally found her voice, and it came out as barely a whisper. "Marie, where did you get the money for something like that?" This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The moment when I got to tell them exactly how blind they'd been to what was happening right under their noses. Grandma gave me a private inheritance 2 years before she died, cash that she'd saved specifically for this purpose. She told me to wait for the right moment to use it. She said I'd know when that moment came. I turned to look directly at Valerie, whose face had gone from white to green. "That moment came about 10 minutes ago when you tried to triple my rent on my own property." The weight of what had just happened started sinking in around that table like stones dropping into water. Valerie, who had spent 3 years collecting rent from tenants in a building she thought she owned, had just discovered she'd been a tenant herself this entire time. Valerie, who had been positioning herself as my generous benefactor, had just learned she'd been living in my building, paying me rent through a management company, while treating me like I should be grateful for her charity. The golden child, who could do no wrong, had just discovered she'd been playing property manager in her little sister's building. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Valerie's carefully constructed superiority crumbled in real time, like watching a skyscraper collapse floor by floor. The family members who had nodded along with her rent increase were now looking at her with confusion and embarrassment. How had they gotten it so wrong? How had they missed something this big? But here's the thing that surprised me most about this moment I'd been planning for 3 years. I didn't feel vindicated or victorious. I felt profoundly sad. Sad that it took owning a building to get my family's respect. Sad that my parents had stayed silent while they watched one daughter try to financially devastate the other. Sad that this was what it took for them to finally see me as something other than the family disappointment who needed their charity and guidance. Sad that my own grandmother had known this day would come and had felt the need to arm me for battle against my own family. Valerie left without saying goodbye. Just gathered her purse and walked out of that backyard without looking back, her perfect composure finally cracked beyond repair. My parents tried to apologize, fumbling over words about misunderstandings and assumptions, but it felt hollow. They weren't sorry they had stayed silent. They were sorry they'd gotten caught staying silent. As everyone awkwardly filtered out of the backyard, making excuses about early mornings and long drives home, I realized something important. Something that changed how I saw not just this moment, but my entire life up to this point. I hadn't bought that building to get revenge on Valerie. I'd bought it because my grandmother saw something in me that no one else did, the strength to stand up for myself when it really mattered. She hadn't just given me money, she'd given me the tools to never let anyone make me feel small again. The silence of my parents did hurt worse than Valerie's words. Their betrayal cut deeper than anything she could have said or done to me. But sometimes the people who hurt us the most also teach us the most about who we really are underneath all the pain and doubt. And who I really am is someone who owns her own building and doesn't need anyone's permission to take up space in this world. If this story showed you that the quiet ones often have the most power, and that sometimes the biggest victories come from the longest waits, hit that subscribe button, because everyone deserves to hear stories about underdogs who win in the end. Now I want to know, have you ever had a moment where you finally stood up to someone who had been keeping you down? A moment where you revealed something that completely changed the power dynamic? Tell me about it in the comments, because I think we all need to hear more stories about people who refuse to stay small.